I've had enough of David Moyes, but I think perhaps more pertinently, I believe that David Moyes has probably had enough of West Ham. Carries that demeanour about him. He's a frustrated man. He's an angry man a lot of the time. I've seen it before. I've mentioned it before on here. I remember, what's his name, Nigel Pearson at Leicester when he did Ostrich Ramp. I remember Roy Hodgson just before he left England. Kenny Dalglish, second stint at Liverpool. There's been many of them. They're easy to spot managers who basically reached not the end of their shelf life. I'm not saying there's not other managerial jobs for David Moyes. I'm quite sure other clubs would take him on. I'm not sure how many Premier League clubs would take him on. Probably 3 or 4, if that, but not many. But I think his time at West Ham is done. You can certainly sense that he's frustrated with the criticism he's received, but I think the criticism he receives is completely justified, by the way. I was looking for a little bit of something else after the game. What I got was more of the same, and what I'm talking about here is his post-match press conference, his post-match interviews. He kept himself blameless. He was pretty scathing about his defenders, and it was poor defending, by the way. It's absolutely terrible defending, but as ever with David Moyes, viewed with detachment, viewed from the outside, looking in like he'd played no part in anything whatsoever. He talks about a reaction. We'll have to see the reaction. He's talking about the next games. Today, I'll probably publish this on Monday morning, but today, as I record it on Sunday, that was meant to be the reaction. That was meant to be the reaction to going out against Leverkusen. Too little, too late against Leverkusen. That we didn't really contest or go for it in the first half. In the first leg, we went for it in one half of the second leg. And, of course, everybody always lines up to defend David Moyes. And I'm not talking about West Ham fans. I think West Ham fans are completely within their right. So if you like David Moyes, I totally understand why, and you're within your right to defend him. I'm talking about the pundits here, and they were very quick to point out, look how West Ham played in the first half. Well, actually, they said all game. It wasn't all game. I think the players did us proud, but I think the first half we were really good against Leverkusen. But West Ham don't play like that. That's not reflective of how West Ham play, and I said that at the time. And what worries me more and more, and one of the reasons, and I've actually made some notes here just so as I don't miss anything out, but even looking at the notes, I'll probably miss stuff out. Even more and more, I look at it and I think the way we play, the way we set up, is so incredibly negative. David Moyes actually alluded to the fact before the game, he's a complete contradiction. A complete and utter contradiction. He does it in everything. I mentioned on yesterday's video how Moyes did it when he alluded to the fact that Xabi Alonso had all these players off the bench to choose from, how it was advantageous to have a squad and have players that you use. And then within a week, he contradicted that purely by saying that actually he didn't like big squads. He thought they caused problems. His words, not my words. The contradiction of the day against Crystal Palace, I felt, was that in the build-up to it, he said that West Ham had to win all their remaining games. Again, his words. I'm not using my words against him. I will in a bit, but I'm using his words against him. The West Ham had to win all their games, and then when he did the interview, this interview was was on the official website. So this is the official interview with West Ham TV. But he does lots. So he did an interview with the BBC, Match of the Day, did an interview with Sky, did an interview with TalkSport. He does lots of interviews. And as a punishment, I sort of listened to all of them. So having said that we needed to win all the games, he said that West Ham never should have been that shaky at the back because they set out not to concede. They set out to be good defensively. Those are his words. Okay, and then afterwards, he then turned around and said, we didn't seem to get in their half in the first 15, 20 minutes. Well, which one is it, mate? Because they're all a complete contradiction. We all know that he was going to set up to defend. I was hopeful, having heard his words in the build-up to the game, that actually he was going to go out and attack. I thought it was the only thing he could possibly do. They had a makeshift defence and we had to go at them. He didn't do it. His words afterwards didn't match his words before. There was no going for it. What you saw was not the tactics of a man that knew he had to win a number of games. And I think that is one of his biggest failings. He just cannot understand that his tactics don't work at all. You can be a defensive manager. You can do that. We've seen many of them throughout our time. You can be a defensive manager, but it has to work. You've got to be good. You've got to be really tight at the back. And then, whoever it is, and I always think back to George Graham, 1-0 to the Arsenal and all the rest of it, but Mourinho was a defensive manager, and, you know, for the first 3 or 4 jobs he had, it really, really worked, didn't it? You can be that, but you've got to make sure that when you do get a chance to attack, that you score, and you've got to make sure that your defence is rock solid. Ours isn't. Ours is about as bad as it gets. I'm honestly, unless you are Sheffield United, Luton and Burnley, we are worse than everyone else. All these clubs that have been flirting with relegation, these clubs that you've been thinking that maybe Luton might catch, they've all got better defences than we have. Yet still, this narrative gets peddled that David Moyes is a good defensive manager. He's not. He's just not. You look back, and actually we weren't too bad in that season where we qualified for the Europa League. I remember saying, well, this is really weird. I remember saying to Gio on videos, for those who've been listening to Hammer's chat for a long time, might remember me saying it. I said, this is weird. West Ham never have a positive goal difference. Remember me saying that? Well, we're back to having a really, really bad negative goal difference. Very rare that you will see a club in the top 10 with a -10 goal difference. Well, that's what we've got, and for that reason, we probably won't finish in the top 10. It's an anomaly. I don't know about expected goals. I don't know about all that modern stuff, but I do know that. I do know that that's very, very rare. And with that sort of ratio, with that sort of negative goal difference, you're probably not going to stay in the top 10. I'm not the only one that doesn't know about modern stuff, though, and that's David Moyes. He has a complete and utter disdain for it. And for that, it's reasons like that rather than him adapt to the new landscape, which is 5 substitutes and lots of players on your bench, he would rather, these are his words, he would rather take it back to how it was before. He thinks squads are too big. He thinks there are too many substitutions. But the thing is, football ain't going to change for him. Football's going to evolve just like everything else evolves. I can imagine he's the type of guy that's got a Nokia 3210 and he's probably saying, hold on, I want mobile phones to be like this, like they used to be. Oh, everybody at some extent or another wants things to be how they used to be, but things aren't. Things move on and football moves on. And he hates it. I'll take you back to his first press conference. He said, I've noticed a lot of old-fashioned trends are coming back into football. Now, that press conference is famous for him saying 2 things. He said, winning is what I do, and he spoke about the Red Bull model. And because of that, because there are these big nuclear things that he said, a lot of the other stuff is missed. But he absolutely said, he alluded to the fact that having less possession, that being a little bit more robust, that defending deeper, not attacking, not basically, as Allardyce would say, not playing tippy-tappy football. David Moyes thought that was coming back into vogue. He said he'd done his time as a UEFA consultant and he thought that was the next trend. The next trend was going back to an old-fashioned way of playing football. Well, it never has and it never will. I'm not saying nobody will ever be defensive again, but that's just not the way it's played now. And Moyes has got to understand that he takes the money. The money that allows him to bring in players like Calvin Phillips on big wages, the money that allows him to have a multi-million-pound contract comes from the fact that football's changed. Football's now the entertainment business. It really is. Football's a brand in many respects. And people want their entertainment. They really, really do. There's not a lot of call for his brand of football. You get to be careful what you wish for stuff as well. And we've heard a lot about that. And there's a lazy example that's always brought up, an old example. And there's a reason they bring up an old example. Because it's either the only one or it's the only one they can think to use. And the example is, be careful what you wish for. I remember, that's what they say, I remember when Alan Kirbishley was at Charlton. And we told them, those Charlton fans, be careful what you wish for. Kirbishley left, Charlton got relegated. They used to say, how much further, how much higher is there for Charlton to go? I would agree, by the way, at that point, there probably wasn't much higher for Charlton to go. But that is not the same example as West Ham, because West Ham have moved to a different stadium. West Ham have a much bigger club than Charlton. Charlton weren't paying top 8 wages, West Ham are. Charlton were not at the time one of the richest clubs in Europe, West Ham are. West Ham are soon to announce a turnover of over 300 million. It's huge. It's huge. So the comparison with Charlton is a lazy one. But if you're going to go with be careful what you wish for, I've got another example for you. I'm not even going to use Crystal Palace because, again, they were told be careful what you wish for. Without Roy Hodgson, you could be in trouble. They seem to be doing okay. But I'll go with Brighton Hove Albion. Under Chris Hughton, and the Brighton fans were a bit tired of it. They were calling for a more expansive brand of football. All these same pundits said the same thing. Be careful what you wish for. It's just good just for just for Brighton to be in the Premier League, they said. Get rid of Hughton. He knows what he's doing. He's old school. He knows how to keep a club in the Premier League. Well, they weren't careful what they wished for. They wished for something else, and they got something else, and actually they end up getting European football and end up doing even better without Chris Hughton. But Alan Shearer won't tell you that. Alan Brazil won't tell you that. They won't use that example. No, they'll go back to Charlton Athletic because it suits their purposes rather than using the most recent example. There are times when I watch West Ham at the moment and I am very, very worried. And watching Mohamed Kudus would be one of those. I find it hard to imagine that a player like that enjoys playing for West Ham. How can he? How can he? It's hard to watch. It's not enjoyable to watch. And I just think, I wonder if I was an attacking player, I'd be wanting to be in a team. Obviously, probably aware that I wasn't going to score every game, but at least be in a team where I would have some chances every game. He's not. There's been much of the game when he plays for West Ham, he is closer to Vladimir Coufal at right back than he is to the opposition goal. That's really not clever stuff. That's really not a wise thing to do when you've got someone of the talent of him. I see it. I see it in their body language. These players are just going to get fed up. And we can't afford to lose players like him. And I look at it and it's going full circle now. I actually look at someone like Lucas Paquetá and he's been so bad. And by the way, I thought he was awful. And that's not all on Moyes. I'm not saying that. I think Paquetá's got to take some form of responsibility. But bearing in mind he's been under investigation all season, his performances and the fact that he's been able to focus on playing at a high level for as long as he has surprised me. I didn't think I thought he'd disappear into his shell straight away at the start of the season. My point is, we've had a lot more from Lucas Paquetá this season than I ever thought we would get. But it's so bad now, and he's getting bad. I don't think he's played well for quite a long time. When I first heard that Manchester City were trying to drive the price down, his £85 million release clause, I thought, no, do me a favour. No chance. Hey, he ain't looking like an £85 million player at the moment. And I do think this happens. I do think after a while, players get worn down. And I worry, to move back onto Kudus for a second, I worry, really do, that he's going to be playing so deep that in the end he gets Fornals. That's just what happens. And then you hear the comments that people like Fornals and Ben Rama say. They sound like a hostage that's just been released from captivity. They sound liberated, free of the shackles of this sort of oppressive system that they've been asked to play in. It's not good for them. We've got a big problem. We've got a big rebuild coming up. The squad is small. That's David Moyes' choice. Even if you just concede that we need a rebuild, I would suggest David Moyes is not the man for the choice. Why? He doesn't believe in it. He doesn't. That's his words. It needs a massive overhaul. A lot of players need changing. A lot of them look stale and they look old. The stat has always been that we are the second oldest squad in the Premier League. There's only one way to go. Well, there's two ways to go. I guess you can either be you can be the first oldest squad in the Premier League. Or you go the other way. If you're going to do it, you're going to have to start getting rid of some of the older players. Poor old Angelo Ogbonna, he's 36 in May. Should not, in any way, shape or form, have been playing against Crystal Palace, against those fast players. It's not said in hindsight. It was quite obvious what those players were capable of. It's not like there was no solution. David Moyes found it in the second half. It was actually better playing Ben Johnson, a little bit more mobile there. he made the wrong call. It took too long to rectify it, and even then, I'm not sure it would have made an awful lot of difference, but it probably would have saved West Ham from utter humiliation. There might have been that. So the squad needs an overhaul. I'm not entirely sure, despite the richness of West Ham's squad and the fact that we'll have a £300 million turnover. I'm not sure we're going to be able to spend limitless amounts of money because of financial fair play. I don't know. I'm not going to pretend to know how much. I heard that West Ham could spend 75 million. That was Kieran Maguire's figure. I'm sure that will be more because we'll have earned more money. So even if we can spend 100 million, let's say, we're not going to be able to do all those positions, and we need to do a lot of positions. Definitely a striker, definitely a left back. The midfield's not fit for purpose. Left winger, and not all the midfield, but we need a midfielder. Centre back is a crisis at centre back. Probably a right back. Almost definitely, because it seems like Soufal and Ben Johnson are both going to leave. What are we going to do? So the squad's too old. What? Ask Soufal to go again? He's running. Even his energy reserves are being depleted. He's not in his late 20s anymore either. He's in his 30s, and it's the problem with the squad. The 100 million ain't going to cover all those positions. So what we're going to do? Well, we're going to have to start bringing some players through from the academy, and we've got some talented players. I don't think everybody from the academy is going to manage to get through, but I do believe here that in Orford, Earthy, Ollie Scarles certainly, West Ham have 3 players, and they're not the only ones, but West Ham have 3 players that are going to have professional careers. I think they're talented players as well. So West Ham need to find out if that's going to work out or not. Well, there are a ton of managers in the Premier League who will play young players. In fact, I would suggest that David Moyes is one of the few that doesn't. I know he played George Earthy, but let's be fair, he's been dragged kicking and screaming to do that. Maybe George Earthy would have played against Crystal Palace, but it needs a little bit more than that. We need to integrate 2 or 3 from the academy who are going to be used as regular squad members. And I don't mean squad members in the way that David Moyes does it. I mean squad members in the way that everybody else aside from David Moyes does it. Because once again, I mentioned it earlier on in the video, it is a situation whereby the rules have changed and we're allowed 5 substitutes, and he has adjusted to it far slower than anybody else. We hoped that when we was allowed more subs, that he'd do more subs. I always used to think, it's just a problem with like Yarmolenko and Snodgrass and stuff like that. And when he gets players and a better squad, he'll use them more. He doesn't. He's got the money there. West Ham wanted to sign players. The club and Tim Steidten, well, David Sullivan and Tim Steidten both wanted to sign players in January. They both offered him players. He said no. The only player he wanted was Calvin Phillips. Now, up until 3 days ago, people might have been able to say, well, you don't know that. You don't know that. Maybe we didn't, but I suspected it. And I'd heard it from some pretty good sources. Fortunately, during the last few days, David Moyes has confirmed that he only wanted to use a small squad, that he thought the squad was too big. So off Fornals went, off Ben Rama went. It was his risk. It was his gamble. His gamble was that he could see through a European campaign and a Premier League campaign with just a small squad. It was a gamble that failed. It was reliant on nobody getting suspended and no one getting injured. But again, that's stuff that happens in football. He was wrong. And the thing is, David Moyes, particularly from me, has received a lot of praise when he's got stuff right. Right after we won the Conference League, I said, I got a lot of stick for it in a video, actually. I said, he probably deserves to see out the final year of his deal. And I thought he did. He just won a trophy. And I was grateful for that. And I praised him for that. But if you're going to take the gratitude, you're going to take the praise, you're going to have to also accept the criticism when it comes. So I'm quite happy to call when he gets things right. I was going to say I'm quite happy to call when he gets wrong. I'm not happy to call it at all because it means things have gone wrong. And this is bad. He just doesn't carry the demeanour or have the walk and the talk of a man that is even remotely motivated nor have the ability to take us forward at this point, or any point. He's a man that looks like he needs a rest. And for the life of me, I've never understood it, from not just David Moyes, anyone, why they don't. Is football that addictive? Is football management that addictive? He does not look like a happy man. Is it that addictive? Yeah, you have to do it. He is a multi-millionaire. Just take yourself away for 6 months. Take the wife away. I'm pretty sure she's had to follow you around the football world for the whole length of your marriage. Go and do something nice. Go and relax. Why are you putting yourself through this? And actually, the fact of the matter is, I feel like putting a lot of West Ham fans through this. And I don't speak for all West Ham fans. I really don't. There's a lot of fans that want to keep him and are happy with what David Moyes is doing. I get it. If all you've ever wanted is to win a trophy, and all I ever wanted to do was win a trophy. I used to say, all I want to do is see West Ham win a trophy. Well, I have now. I have. Well, listen, I remember watching the 1980 Cup final on telly. But I'm not sure how much I remember of it. I've watched the video a number of times, but now I look back and think, I think I just remember watching the footage rather than... I remember the day, but, But just because... Is that it? Because I've had my trophy and I've had that thing that I wished for? Does that mean I can't wish for anything else? Well, according to David Moyes and his cronies in the media, yes, that does mean that. But I find it a low expectation, a weird thing to advise. Not just in football. Be careful what you wish for. What, is that just a football thing? I mean, I've already, just by giving the Brighton example, I've debunked that. Give me an hour of searching examples and I will find many, many more, I'm quite sure. But it's bad advice from ill-advised men, quite frankly. Be careful what you wish for. Anyone? Is that what? Is that the same? What about your job? Should you do that in your job? Don't strive to move on to a new company and try and do something else? Or what is that? Is it advice for life, or is it just relevant and pertinent to David Moyes and West Ham fans? Because it seems like it is. I've just had enough. I really have. I sort of thought about doing this video and thought, maybe I'll, maybe as I've been talking, maybe this little caveat of maybe things will change if he goes on a winning run and we get Europe. But do you know what? I don't even believe it. I don't believe we're capable. And do you know what? If he does get a reaction from the players, it will annoy me even more. There's a few people have said, when I said about the players being tired, a few people have said, don't be ridiculous. They're professional athletes. They don't get tired. Look, that's nonsense. It's absolutely nonsense. Professional athletes has nothing to do with it. Nothing to do with it at all. The suggestion that professional athletes can't get tired is easily debunked. If that did not matter, then there's a reason. Then just the fastest runners would run every event at the Olympics, wouldn't they? And they wouldn't get tired. Why wouldn't they? Why wouldn't they be able to? Why wouldn't Mo Farah have run the 10,000 metres, the 5,000 metres, the 1,500 metres, the 800 metres, and the marathon? Well, because that doesn't stack up, does it? He's a professional athlete, right? Well, you can't, because your body eventually gets tired. It needs time to recover. And footballers are no different. So there is some certain fatigue levels, but I can't use that as an excuse, because David Moyes chose, that was his choice. He believed it to be so. And again, the medical department has had a lot of praise from me. And I don't know, I don't particularly want to pin the blame on sports science or whoever else works for the club. Because David Moyes might have been given the data to suggest that these players can't play twice a week at this intensity without being substituted. Maybe David Moyes just ignored the data. I find it hard to believe that the data would have been presented to him, that was the case, because I don't believe it. I don't believe that people can't get tired. So I think to suggest that these players are professional athletes, so they should play 2 days a week, 2 games a week at the same intensity, and that can't be an observation, is a preposterous, binary, black and white notion. That's not the case. And what it does is it actually probably detracts away from some of the more detailed reasons of what's gone wrong, hopefully all of which I've covered in this long-ass video. There you go. Anyway, Yeah, it's funny. I thought I'd do this. I normally do a video like calm down, but I was quite calm after the game. Was disappointed, certainly. There's certainly some things that annoyed me, but I knew I'd lost my sort of fight and my spirit for it when I listened to David Moyes' interviews knowingly. They didn't infuriate me. They were to be expected. No culpability for himself. He has, as I've always mentioned, I've always been reluctant to call David Moyes a narcissist or anything like that. I'm not a medical man. I'm not a psychologist. It's not for me to diagnose anyone or anything like that. And I've also suspected to do anything really well in probably in an industry as hostile as football, you probably do need to have belief in yourself. You do. Just to survive at anything, probably have to have a certain amount of single-mindedness. It's a trait that I would imagine most of the managers have, a single-mindedness. But sometimes you can be single-minded and back an idea. That doesn't necessarily mean it's the right idea. Doesn't mean that it's the right ethos. Doesn't mean that your way is a correct way or the productive way. Because I've seen so many people back a poor decision in my time that ultimately has a poor outcome. It worked for David Moyes, but just because it worked for a couple of years doesn't mean that it's worked in his final year. And I think now, as we look at a situation whereby his contract is expired, that we need a big rebuild, we've got a director of football in place. As I mentioned in yesterday's video, I look at it and I think West Ham are at the start of a new project. A new manager coming in probably needs to be given a 3-year deal. And with a remit and a mandate to not only bring players through from the academy, but to bring players in and for us to operate at a situation where we're not hemorrhaging money by bringing in players that don't work out, that cost millions. And I think that's, if you are an owner, that's absolutely fine, because that's the changing world of football. Football went for a really rich period where most Premier League clubs could probably afford to take a £20 million punt on a player, and if it didn't work out, that was fine. If it didn't work out, they'd just buy another one. That's not the case anymore. You lose that money on a player, that is £20 million that you can't spend elsewhere. Financial fair players say, hold on, you've already spent your 80%, your 85%, or whatever it might be at that given time. So again, that's changed. It's another thing that he probably wouldn't fully understand. You can't do it, be it a Calvin Phillips or a Vlasic, or even you might find yourself actually going into a club where you have to make other players work. It's no good anymore saying, well, he didn't sign that player. Actually, the best managers will go into a club and they'll make someone else's signings work. Not enough to write off 35 million for Felipe Anderson or take a 25 million pound hit on Sebastian Haller. You're not going to be able to do that anymore. I just don't think for that reason he's not the right man for the job. Football's changed. West Ham have got a new project, and it is at least a 3-year project. And when I look at it, even if you think up to this point David Moyes has done a swell job, the next 3 years David Moyes in charge, an ever tighter financial restraint at a point where we're going to need to bring young players through, because we probably need 7 or 8. We're not going to be able to buy 7 or 8. Is David Moyes the man for that job? Not for me.